Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here at 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning. I wasn't sure if we were going to walk into an empty room this morning. Really appreciate you being present and being interested in what we've put together for you. What I'd like to do is say a little bit about what our hopes are for this panel, and then I'll introduce myself and others will introduce themselves. But I'll just start off with a few words about why we've put this group of people together. We fundamentally believe that it's critical for all Christians to live into the baptismal covenant and to find ways to exercise ministry that reflects their own talents and their interests and their abilities. And we've put together a group of people from the Locke Innovation Fellows and from the Trinity Leadership Fellows who all in their own way are exploring how to live out their Christian ministry in settings that are outside the church. And this has always been important and true of Christianity, so this isn't a new concept at all. But we really feel like as the church moves into a period of change, and as our society is going through very tumultuous change, it's even more important for all Christians to find ways to tap into their talents and to live out that baptismal covenant so that they can offer the good news of the gospel and God's love in many different locations and many different forms. I'll say a couple of words about myself and my work at Trinity Church Wall Street. I'm the executive director of the Trinity Leadership Fellows program, and that's a relatively new project that Trinity has offered up to the world, where we bring together 24 interesting, dynamic leaders who are people of faith, serving their congregations and their communities in a wide variety of ways. About 2/3 of the group is typically ordained clergy from a variety of denominations. About 1/3 are lay people who are living out their baptismal vows in a variety of different ways. And what we do is look for people who have the talent and the energy and the aspiration to serve congregation and community in really faithful and effective ways and to build community and relationship, and then provide them with a cohort experience so that they have a community of accountability and learning, and also with a rigorous curriculum. I think it's fair to say that they find it a little challenging. That focuses on developing their skills. And those skills, I won't enumerate them now, but those skills are really very much about building relationship and building community. The Fellows program sits alongside a couple of other initiatives at Trinity that I'm responsible for, a grant-making initiative to help other organizations in the church build out their own leadership development programs. And then we have a wonderful relationship with the Church Divinity School of the Pacific that is also quite obviously about developing new leaders for the church. So that's my work at Trinity. I'll hand things over to Lisa to introduce herself and to say a little bit about her work.
So I'm Lisa Greenwood, and I do serve at the Texas Methodist Foundation and a national entity called Wesleyan Impact Partners. And just a little bit of background on myself. I was 20 years in the local church serving. I'm clergy, and part of that time I worked with Horizon Stewardship Company doing fundraising, capital campaigns, visioning work, strategic planning, as was described. And I've been at the foundation now for 12 years and 18 months as the president. And we are an organization that everything that we do is to help strengthen the church's mission. And we do that through financial services like investments and lending and planned giving and philanthropy work, as well as coming alongside leaders in the church, lay and clergy, who are trying to lean into the church's best witness and strongest witness. So we do cohorts and gatherings and learning and innovation work and those sorts of things. But as I said, everything that we do is to help strengthen the church's mission for this season. And what we know is that, and I think what we all believe, is that the church has a really vital role to play, especially right now in our culture, and it is not a time for the church to be timid. And so all of us, as called and equipped Christians, need to stand to our full height so that we can help the church have its best witness and strongest witness right now. And I mean that in a way that is, how do we bring about a world of love and grace and mercy and justice and hope and belonging and joy, right? And so let me say a little bit about the Locke Innovative Leader Award without going into too much depth about our theory of change and these sorts of things, but just to say that one of the things we knew would be important as we help churches think about their own mission, that it's important to see those, to experience those who are pushing the edges of the church, that are really challenging all of us to help human beings flourish and communities flourish. And that some of these spiritual innovators, if you will, and entrepreneurs, if we could, who live most of their ministry sort of on the edges, the inside edge, if you will, of the church's ministry, can help all of us, and especially those of us who are in the center, who are leading organizations or denominations or congregations, to help stretch our imagination for what's possible. And so these Locke Innovative Leaders are both practitioners, but also influencers and catalysts for a new imagination for the church today and into the future. And we hope that by spotlighting them and networking them together, that they can help all of us who are part of the call to be the church to lean into what it means to be the church today and tomorrow. I hope that makes sense. Yeah. So, Diamond?
Greetings. Diamond Harges from Indianapolis. I am known in 2 ways: as a social banker and the roving listener. I run a little organization called The Learning Tree. My neighbors are my business partners. We tithe about 40% of our income to support the 10-block radius around where we live. We hope we work with institutions across many spectrums, theology, philanthropy, government, to learn how to be good neighbors as institutions. And what that means for us is, how do we identify and uplift the goodness in the world?
Yeah.
I'm Jessica Field, and I am one of the Trinity Fellows in the first cohort. My journey has been one of noticing and trusting. So noticing where gifts lie, noticing where the needs are around me, and trusting the path that is unfolding always. This started in college, really. I found a pamphlet to volunteer with kids in foster care. That led to a change in degree toward rehabilitation, which led to working with women in shelters, experiencing homelessness, trauma, addiction, mental illness, sex work. That led into being an abuse counselor. All the while, I was also a youth minister. So I had 2 models that I was working within, and there was some overlap, but not enough. You had a biopsychosocial model in the social service world, which is wonderful, but lacking.
Yeah.
And you have a spiritual model at the church, which is wonderful, but lacking. And so in my curiosity, in my noticing, where do these worlds come together? I found a brand new program at the University of Toronto and received a Master's of Pastoral Studies in Spiritual Care and Psychotherapy. People were starting to bring the worlds together. As I left that program, I was in Canada. I moved back to my hometown of Tucson, Arizona, and I worked in a for-profit business for the first time at Canyon Ranch Wellness Resort, offering spiritual care to people who were experiencing loss or seeking forgiveness or looking at meaning and purpose in their lives. I learned a lot there, but I felt that pull, that unfolding, to work with more vulnerable people again. And so I found myself back in the Episcopal Church, leading an outreach program, offering food and showers and social services. And what do you know? I accepted that position in February 2020.
Yeah.
And so what did we notice? New needs. Where are the gifts? Time, talent, treasure. How can we meet the needs, and how do we trust the unfolding? I was also working in youth ministry at that church, and that unfolded into getting to know Trinity. And Trinity really supported this idea that I had. So all of this collective noticing What do the people who live on the streets of Hamilton, Ontario, have in common with people dwelling in the mystical and gilded spaces of Canyon Ranch Resort, and have in common with the youth in my church circles? And it is that everyone has the need to heal, everyone laughs, everyone cries, everyone bleeds, everyone dances, everyone hungers, everyone feels lonely, and everyone needs to belong. So as a spiritual wellness coach, which is what I am doing now, I'm able to meet individuals in those spaces. I'm able to meet groups in those spaces. Everyone has a deep need for connection, belonging, identity, meaning, and purpose. When we don't access that spiritual part of us, we can never truly feel whole or fulfilled. So people come to me when they're looking for that. One of the unique things that's branched out of this as well, because of my background in crisis and my experiences, I've injected someone with naloxone and started CPR. I've had food thrown at me. I've de-escalated conflict. I can now help church leaders because I also intimately know the church. So I continue to trust the unfolding.
Gosh, that's so beautiful. I feel like I want to come walk with you in Tucson.
Yes.
Please do.
My name is Shannon Hopkins, and I'm currently the co-founder of an organization called Rooted Good. But when people talk about me, they often will say she's a connector or she's just an experimenter. I think it's all this kind of quest for learning. And I've been driven by the church that's becoming. I'm from Texas. I grew up about 4 hours from here, but for 20 years this month, I've been in London because I was trying to, from 1998 to 2003, I was trying to merge and learn, what's the intersection of social impact and a new ecclesiology that's going to take the church into the future. And I was working with young leaders and experimenting with new forms of Christian community. And in Texas in 2000, that wasn't a very popular place to be. So I come back and I'm like, wow, look what God is doing. That actually what you're doing is normal. And everyone's getting it and going, yes, I want that, I want that. How do we make that infuse the church? So over the last 20 years, I've worked launching social enterprises, so working with women that were homeless, which, we worked with 654 women and 30% were in employment and resettled. But we were mobilizing artists that were like, does faith have any meaning today? And we were putting meaning and purpose together for young adults, or campaigning on the demand side of human trafficking and winning awards from the UN because, actually, our faith has to move the needle on the issues of our day. But what I found is as I've done more and more of that work of this is what it can look like, then the church is trying to catch up. The institutions are trying to catch up. How do we learn? So then we've been creating tools and resources to really help and equip. Where are you? What are the needs and opportunities in your context, and how do we give you frameworks to lean in? And I think this is the greatest moment the church is experiencing. I mean, what an amazing time to be a Christian in our context, honestly, because it's do or die. It's like the church is becoming something new, and so I'm really excited about that. Anyway, that's me.
Wonderful. Hi, I am Carrie Wallace, and my most fundamental identity is as a writer. I've published several novels. Most recently, I've put out a few books for children from a religious perspective. I've done a collection of stories of the saints for kids, a collection of psalms for kids, and I have a book coming out next year, early next year, called The Discipline of Inspiration, the Mysterious Encounter with God at the Heart of Creativity. And that book comes out of another part of my identity, which is that I am somebody who has spent a lot of time trying to help other artists to make more art. And that might sound like a generous thing, but actually it's very greedy. I am somebody who has had my life saved by art a number of times, and I desperately need other artists to put more art into the world. And so it's something that I do because I feel like I need it. And I'm somebody who has also done all of this work only with the materials that I personally have had at hand. So I'm from Michigan. If any of you know anything about Michigan, everybody has a lake house, or many people have a lake house. So we have this tiny little hand-built house that my great-grandfather built, and it's 1 bedroom. And I started doing an art retreat, did that for about 10 years, brought people out for a week, and the cost of entry was they had to make something while they were there. I then, when I moved to New York City, started having a dinner party every week with just the 6 or 7 people who I knew there. When I finally laid that down, there were 200 people on that invite list. On any given night, 10 to 15 of them would come to my house, and that included people whose names you would probably recognize if I felt like dropping names, but people who went on to become literary lights and important people in the sort of creative scene in New York, and were nurtured by the connections that they made there. So when my first book came out in 2008, I had some time on my hands, and I started thinking about what do artists really need after all of this work that I had done with artists? And what I realized was that artists have a really profound desire to make it, but that desire is not actually because they want fame or because they want money. It's because they want the space to actually make something. They just want the time in their daily lives to make art. And ironically, unless they have that time, they will never make it. They will never make enough to make it in the art world at large. So, and I happen to have a very strong creative habit because I'm a writer who comes from a family of musicians. So when I said I was going to be an artist, they were like, of course you will practice. So I had a very strong habit of doing a little bit every day and could see the power of that. And I realized that that was something, if I could give it to other artists, that was something nobody could ever take away from them. Nobody ever had to recognize or baptize them as special enough to do their art. And it was also something that you could do. Much of the funding that we do in the arts has to do with elevating people who are already famous. We give stages, we give our church stages to people who are already famous. We also, when we are interested at all in actual creation, we're giving commissions to people who are already famous, or we are taking people out of the context of their daily life and giving them residencies. Now, I'm somebody who is at this time working as a waitress and a maid. I had 2 weeks of vacation a year. I could not go to a residency without losing my job. And there are a lot of other people who have something to say who also fit that description. They need to find a way to make art in the context of their daily life. So I created a program to help them create those habits and rolled it out through Mako Fujimura's International Arts Movement, and it has now been done. And my mother almost immediately got extremely sick, so I piloted it several times, made this open source project, set it free in the world, and when I surfaced from several family illnesses, started realizing that people in New York were like, I just did that Working Artist Initiative. And I was like, I created that. I had no idea that City Seminary was doing it. When I started searching, it turns out that Rick Warren's Saddleback Church has also run multiple quarters of this program.
Wow.
So this is a very practical program in some ways. This is a program that would be useful to any artist, regardless of whether they have a faith background or not. So why am I talking about doing this in the church? The reason I'm talking about doing it in the church is because I am a Christian, and because I really deeply believe that God is the source of all true art, whether it is a famous opera or whether it is somebody standing at in their backyard garden deciding in what order they're going to plant the flowers. And I also really believe that that when we can welcome God into our life and our work, that anyone can be an artist and that anything can be art. And I think that we are at a moment when virtually all public speech is incredibly compromised. We no longer believe our politicians, our journalists. We do not believe each other on social media. We do not believe the people who are speaking to us from our pulpits. I'm sorry, but it's true. But the last language in this culture in which we can speak prophetically, speak with sincerity, speak about meaning and transcendence is art. And people are recognizing the living presence of God in art. The worship experiences of the past summer were at Beyonce and Taylor Swift concerts. Yeah. And people are getting married when they leave the church. They are getting married in art galleries and libraries. And they are not wrong. They are actually finding God there, is what I believe. And if we can name that those experiences, our holy experiences, are a taste of the God who we can introduce them to at a much deeper level within our churches, I think that it is an extraordinary way to welcome people back into faith and back into art. I also believe that art is a potent tool because God is present in art. It's a potent tool for spiritual formation. And I also think when we talk about innovation in the church and in the world, often we're talking about something that's very mechanistic, that is tech-based, that is profit-driven. If I'm correct that art can only happen without the presence of God, then maybe that is the kind of innovation we actually need in the church, is the creativity of art, the innovation of art. One other thing to mention, I think I may be the only, in some ways the only, we're all laity on the stage, but I am like somebody who has never been supported by anybody in doing this. And I feel like I can speak for perhaps some of the laity who are in your churches and who have something to offer. So what I was given to be able to do any of this was space, and I was given access to people, which no matter how much your church is struggling, you probably have some of both of those things that you could offer to people. And I was talking with a friend of mine from Trinity Wall Street, because what I would really love to do is build this programming that I've created out in a much more robust way than I've been able to independently. And my friend was saying, well, this is like a $500,000 program just to start. And I was like, well, of course, if anybody here wants to give me $500,000, I will totally take it. I will build you something beautiful. But I think it's important how much was able to be accomplished with almost nothing. And I may look like something of a freak of nature in terms of how much I have devoted to this, but I think in almost every church, we have a number of people who are devoting as much as I have devoted to your churches. And when they come forward, often what we're asking them to do is like devote that time to arguing with other members of the vestry, devote that time to the administration of the women's retreat, devote that time to coming to this conference, right? Which is wonderful and necessary, and I know that all of you are doing amazing things under very difficult circumstances with straitened resources, right? But I think it could be very interesting. And I hope in this conversation, one of the things we're going to be doing is think about what if when those people come to us, what if when they want to pour their energy into the church, we are asking them and asking ourselves, what are your dreams? What are your talents? Like what precious things can you perhaps build if we give you the kind of support that I was given, even when there's not huge amounts of funding or gigantic programs? What can be done step by step, instant by instant to create something extraordinary?
Yeah, wow.
Thank you all. I have to say, I know you all. We've met before, obviously. I'm always so inspired when I hear you talk about your work. It's really exciting. As I was listening to you, the themes that come out for me, building relationships in neighborhoods, healing suffering, challenging congregations to understand their mission, finding God in art and beauty, sound like things that lay and ordained leaders do. So I'm wondering if you could reflect on what you think it is about you as a layperson that makes you especially good at doing that kind of work. How is it different when a layperson steps into that kind of work?
Well, no longer we call ourselves servants, but friends. Friendship is the main ingredient. It builds social currency. It holds accountability. That word never is done. But the other thing is the courage for pastoral staff and in institutions to see people like us. Right? My daughter woke me up at 3 o'clock in the morning. She's 21, and she was stressed. And she said, "Dad, how do we know when people are authentically seen?" And she went on to do this research project. And what she turned out to see is like the gospel, is how we're regarded and how we're recognized. And I think the call of the church is not to be the doer, but be the witnesses of where God is working in the world.
Who among us would look at another person and say, you do not have anything to offer?
Right.
God's gifts went to everyone, and our gifts are different. Some clergy may be really good at the things that I do. But I think the laity are the ones who can be more in relationship with other people, like you said, Diamond. The clergy have some restraints, right, within their job description, within their time. Laity have gifts So if you are a lay person, or if you're clergy, you're not clergy in every role of your life, really discern those gifts. Listen and watch, and then have courage to take action and just go with your ideas and see what unfolds.
I think you're right. I mean, I think there's an agility that the laity have. They don't have the same constraints. And they can take a different risk. But actually, they can't make the center move in the same way. Like, we can have the freedom on the edge, the agility on the edge. We can do the new thing. We can experiment. But sometimes to make it affect the center, we need clergy also to come alongside. So there's this great thinker and writer in the UK called Bill Bolton, and he said, not everyone can be an entrepreneur, but we need entrepreneur enablers. And I think that's the relationship a little bit between the laity and the clergy. Not everyone can be an entrepreneur, but we need entrepreneur enablers. And so, I don't know. I think, that's what I say.
Thank you. I would say that the biggest thing I see of having laity rather than clergy do it is simply that laity stand in the world. And that's where the people are. Like, most of the people are not in the churches. They're in the world. And I also think that there's something about having the world be sort of the ether that you swim in most of the time. I think there's an enormous amount of inside baseball that happens inside churches, an enormous number of arguments that are completely irrelevant to the rest of the world, and the laity are steeped in that all the time. And that means that we can respond more relevantly sometimes. And although I think there's a way in which the church should be very stubbornly irrelevant to the concerns of the world, but I think it's good to have the balance of a laity that is steeped in those concerns and able to respond to and speak into those with an immediacy that you don't always have when you're not living in that space full time.
So I so appreciate hearing this, and one of the things that is striking me is every one of you actually work outside the walls of the church, but even the immediate kind of sphere of the church, but every one of you is a deeply committed person of faith, and you haven't given up on the church. You haven't said, oh yeah, we got to do it over here because this ain't happening. You've said, oh no, you're finding some hope in the church. And so I didn't give you warning on this, sorry. So you might just take a moment to think, but why and where are you finding hope in the church for the greater good that you are all working for? And you don't all have to answer. Like I said, I gave you no warning, so.
I was thinking about 25 years ago, I ran into a pastor who is now my best friend and was my pastor, but now it's been gone. His name is Mike Mather. And he's done something that I've seen no other church, social service agency, or healing services asked. He asked me when we first met, tell me your story. And I'm always a little ashamed when I run into pastors because I think about the history of my grandparents who actually really lived in their faith, and I think that's where my transformation came. But him asking that brought that to the surface. And so there are pastoral staff across this country who are oftentimes penalized from being friends. And so I see hope in my friend Mike Mather.
You sure? Yeah. What comes to me is I had a youth worker that when I was in high school, he used to say to me, following Jesus or being a Christian isn't about getting people to come to church with you. It's about the transformation of your high school campus. So where there's justice, so justice. So that's been a driver for me. And that, I think, is why I've worked on the edge and outside of the church, because I so often see from when I went to university, I saw Christians in holy huddles. But actually, to my great surprise, where I'm finding hope today is actually in a lot of fragile churches. We have a church we worked with on the West Coast. They were down to 8 people, but they actually knew their neighbors and knew their needs. And actually, they are radically transforming their city now in partnership with the city and with other nonprofit. And it's like, because they're not about growing their church, they're about the transformation of the world for those around them that are in greatest need, both physical and spiritual. And I can't believe I'm saying it, but it's so hopeful to me that actually the church is I think I'm finding hope, because churches from East Coast to West Coast and this country and others are starting to say, no, who are we as the people of God to sow justice and bring mercy in new ways?
I was not paid by Rob and Tony to say this, but the most hopeful thing I have seen in the church in the last few years has been the cohort that I'm in with Trinity Fellows. And I'm really moved by, sorry, I'm a little weepy, I'm really moved by what those leaders are doing in the church. And I'm moved by young leaders. I've come in contact also with a lot of young Catholic leaders, young Catholic priests through the Stories of the Saints book and the promo that I've had to do for that. And I'm not Catholic myself, so I didn't have a lot of experience with that. But it seems to me that young leaders today are they're not getting anything from it. They really mean, like, they are here because they love Jesus. There's like no place in America today where there's like enough prestige or money in being a minister that it makes sense to do that if that's what you want out of life. So I'm very, very touched by what those young leaders are doing. And I'm also touched by the fact that I know there's astronomical numbers of people applying to this program and that it's hard for them to choose every year who's going to be part of it. So it's not just 24 people a year. There are hundreds and hundreds of these young leaders all over the world doing extraordinary things.
I think hope lies in the beloved community that exists within church. I think we tend toward isolation. The more anxious we get as a species, we tend to isolate. I think some of what came out of the pandemic was further isolation. When we talk about divisions in our society, we're isolating from other people. Church is also a place that you get the message of love, God's love, and holy and eternal redemption. You might not get that message at home. You might not get that message at work. You might not get that message from your immediate community. I hope you get that message from your church, but you certainly get that message from God. You know, at summer camp last summer, working as a chaplain, too many of the youth, middle schoolers, were telling me, I've made these mistakes. I'm unlovable, I'm unsavable. And I was, now I'm gonna get weepy. So 13-year-olds thinking that they're too far gone. So how do we create beloved community and share that message that no one is ever too far gone? That is not God's message.
Thank you.
I have such a practical how-to question that I'm hesitating to offer it up after that beautiful statement. And I'm just reflecting on my opening remarks about how important it is for all of us, all Christians, to live into our call, because there's so much need right now. And we all need to be out there listening and loving. So, Jessica, thank you for doing that. But I will jump into my how-to question, though. You're all entrepreneurs and creators. You know, you've taken the leap to step away from some form of regular, stable employment and then go do your own thing. And that's scary. You know, I know that from a lot of people who are entrepreneurs. And I wonder if you could just say a little bit about, you know, how do you do this? You know, when you have a dream, you feel a call, how do you then realize it? You know, what advice do you have for people out there, hopefully who are going to inspire to do something new and creative? What does that look like, and how do you handle it?
Never do it alone. I remember some of my original work was going door to door in a low-income neighborhood where I lived, asking people for their gifts and talents. And as our congregation, this is 20 years ago, trying to figure out how to be a good neighbor, it only had asked about the needs. And I remember how hard it was to look at residents in the place thinking that they didn't have gifts, and our church members thinking they didn't have problems. I remember going back to Reverend Mike, and I was like, I can't do this work, something that I created. And he sent me on a learning journey. And I hope you're getting themes out of this. And he sent me with 3 friends. And that's where I met John McKnight and some friend in Toronto. And they said, dummy, don't do this alone. And it's been the best thing is around companionship. And even though I'm here today by myself, I'm usually running with 10 to 20 neighbors.
A lot of planning, a lot of support, and a lot of faith, right? Because if this doesn't work out, that's okay. Another vision will come. The path will be lit. Support looks like, I'll show some of my gratitude for Trinity in this. Support looks like people helping to teach you new skills, helping you to shape your ideas and develop a vision, connecting you with other people who can help guide you and collaborate with you. I've been very lucky to not only have Rob and Tony with Trinity, all of the fellows in our cohort, we're given a mentor as well. And that is Reverend Claire Rana for me in Los Altos, and she is wonderful and has been wonderful. I'm also very fortunate to have a lot of supports within my family, so that in saying, I'm gonna start this new thing, I don't know how it's gonna work out. I don't know if it will financially sustain me for a while, but it's important and I'm gonna do this, and having my family be on board with that.
I think you just have to take the next most faithful step. Like, this work comes out of a sense of deep call. It's the thing you can't not do. So I think absolutely you can't do it alone, but you just have to take that next most faithful step. And then I have found peers, and that's one of the things I've loved about the Lock leaders. It's like you've helped us find each other, right? Like the peers that are in this work, taking the same risk.
To me, it's really useful to think about taking steps in terms of habits rather than accomplishments. So it's just a matter of not quitting.
Yeah.
Rather than getting everything right or building a perfect vision. Because I think often if you're going to do something that's really worth doing, it's going to come out of your hands at some point. It's going to look very different than whatever plan you built. So very much like not doing it alone, doing it step by step, but also realizing like the accomplishment is that you did something with what you had in that direction this day. And you are going to do it again tomorrow. And if you can't do it tomorrow, you'll do it the next time that you can do it, has been very powerful for me. And I've seen that be really powerful for other people as well.
Amen.
Yeah. You're so brave. I mean, really, so much courage and so much faith. I'm so grateful to you for the way that you are making decisions and living your lives. And it feels so genuinely faithful and hopeful. And so Rob's question was really about, if folks are having an idea, if they're thinking about stepping into something new and maybe a little risky, that takes courage and faith. And I want to ask a slightly different question, but related, and that is, a room full of folks who are, I bet there's all kinds of innovative, cool ideas in this room, and probably most in the room are in kind of more center positions. They're at a congregation, they have sort of maybe traditional expectations, those sorts of things. I wonder if you have a word of encouragement or advice or such to folks who are in more in center kind of roles, from your perspective, a little closer to the edge. Do you have some encouragement or wisdom, advice?
There's 2 pieces of advice or experience that I've had, and all of us, we can't do a new thing without burying old things, corporately and individually. And I experienced that took 2 years to bury all the things we needed to bury in the church. And the last thing we buried, you'll get a kick out of this, because it's always been done that way.
You buried that phrase or that mindset.
And basically, get up corporately and say, well done, good and faithful servants. The other thing is, I would say that each layperson in your place, they work out in the world. And I noticed that we've in our calling and United Methodist annual conference, so you'll have conferences, we always celebrate the programs of the church, right? We always celebrate the youth services, but what we never celebrate is the Alice Langford. And Alice was a member of my church, and she got the keys to the mayor. And then our annual conference didn't celebrate that. Celebrate the heck out of the goodness in the world.
Take care of yourself. Don't let the work overwhelm you. It's hard to discern where God is leading you in the fog of overwhelm. Get outside, move your body, unplug, drink water. I love that quote. We're basically like a complicated house plant. We just need water and sun, you know?
Nice.
Take care of yourself.
I'm going to piggyback on Diamon's celebrate the heck out of the good in the world. I think actually noticing what's going on, celebrating, but also grieving. And I think there are like two things that, whether you're in the center or you're on the edge, they help us do this work of innovation. They help us take risks. We've got to make space for grief. I actually don't think anything new is born without some sense of lament. And then I think we've got to celebrate, and have patience. I think this is a long game. This is a long road. Our life is, I don't know. I started out more sprinting, but this is a marathon, and so I think patience and pacing is also a big part of it.
Before I say this, I want to frame this by saying I know that people who are clergy and running churches are doing what I consider to be a basically impossible job. I think there are a few jobs that are impossible to do perfectly, maybe impossible to do completely at all, and clergy, public school teachers. So I recognize all of the constraints, all the demands on your life. But I also want to say that your dreams, like your best dreams and the best dreams of your congregation, I think are coming from God. And you should consider them with the force of perhaps a command from God. And I think all of you here actually know what they are. Like, I think all of you here actually know what I'm talking about when I say that. And I would say you also probably have 1,000 reasons why you know that they're impossible to accomplish, because you understand your context much better than I do. And you know everything that you're facing. And I would just say, just start. Just start with whatever you have at hand in the smallest possible way, and just keep doing a little bit, and just don't give up on them, even in the midst of everything else that you are facing.
Shannon, you look like you're about to say, yeah, go ahead.
It just triggered something for me. When, in 2004, when we started working on trafficking, I'd go to all these meetings in the UK, and every meeting, people would stand up and go, but who gave you permission to do this? And I thought it was a great thing that I was from Texas and an American, because I was like, no, you just asked for forgiveness. Just... the dreams that are there, the things you can't not do, you just have to step in. So anyway, that's what triggered for me.
I'm reflecting on the human dimension of what you do, and I think so often we think of entrepreneurs and creators as solo artists. They do it on their own, and each of you in different ways has really highlighted that you're part of a system, that's making it happen. And as we think about that, the work that you're doing is at the edge. It's not at the center, but there's so much that can be learned from people who are working in both of those spaces in both directions. And I'm reflecting on a book that I read recently. It's called Move Fast and Fix Things by a couple of professors at the Harvard Business School. And they're writing against the idea that you have to move fast and break things in order to accomplish something. And the real theme across that book is always remember the human part of what you're doing. You know, when you're setting the strategy, when you're rolling it out, when you're communicating, all those steps involve people. And I'm just loving that in your work, and I'm sure it's true for people who are working in a congregation right at the heart of the system, remembering the human element is essential for your success and for your own well-being. It's not a question, it's just a...
I wanted to say, you know, our Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, is thinking about he calls it social isolation, but his staff says it's belonging. And that's the most faithful thing we could do at a large level, is to use our platform. And I wanted to say that you two are using your platform with the same power, right? The things that I said about my friend Mike, you will also do that. And you're not always rewarded for that. And the hardest thing to get is that an economist that I know, he says, failure is the most abundant thing we can do and learn from. And I think you all are trying that. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Diamond. Thanks. We have just a couple minutes, and I have maybe a speed round question. We've been recording our podcast and doing this question, and it pulls from Isaiah, and it's that no longer consider the things of old, but behold, I am doing a new thing. And so what is something that we ought to not be considering anymore, and what is a new thing that we can have eyes for, that you are seeing God doing? Again, not fair, no prep.
This is a speed question?
I know.
I think the answer partly to that is leave the technocratic things to the time you build relationships. Don't start with the technocrat.
I'm still thinking. Feel free to jump in.
Not fair, I know.
It's totally fair. I just don't have anything off the top of my head.
I mean, I'm going to pull on this. I was talking to a friend that worked for Obama's administration for 7 years. So I don't know if you know that this affordable housing bill that started then is about to go away. And what he said is that really good people worried about the wrong things. And we're all going to suffer for it. And that's what I meant by leaving the technical things until you reached relationships.
Lisa, can I offer a thought on that?
Yeah, please.
What am I seeing that's
Wise one.
new? Actually, I think what a lot of us are talking about is ancient. You know, finding God through beauty and art. The Christian church has been doing that for a long time. And what we need to do is rediscover our roots and really look back at, you know, what's worked in Christian community and revive or strengthen some of those things. They're not gone. And you know, I love innovation, I love technology, but sometimes the most powerful things are the ones that are ancient and have been there right in front of us for a very long time.
So I would say I see it just so much in the work that you all are doing that you are not, like I love this drawing on the ancient, because when we say do not consider the things of old, it doesn't mean negate who we've been, but do not be constrained by, right? And what you all have done is brought a new imagination and something very deeply grounded in our sense of calling, that we're always called to live into our gifts. We're always called to be connected and not do this alone, to take the next faithful step. Like these things that you all, to pay attention to the beauty and to lean into it, and that noticing and leaning in, I think you all are helping us have imagination for and eyes to see, behold. I am doing a new thing. And so thank you for your beautiful ministry and witness. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.